In the year 2000, Netflix offered to sell itself to Blockbuster for $50 million.
Blockbuster laughed and said no.
10 years later, Blockbuster filed for bankruptcy with nearly $1 billion in debt. Netflix was worth $30 billion.
This is the story of the most expensive no in American business history.
And it gets much darker than you think.
To truly understand how Blockbuster collapsed, you cannot start with Netflix. You have to start much earlier. You have to go back to 1985. Back to an America that looked very different from today.
Ronald Reagan was in the White House.
The economy was booming. Suburban neighborhoods were expanding across the country. And a new technology was quietly changing the way Americans spent their Friday nights. The VHS tape.
For the first time in history, ordinary American families could watch movies at home on their own schedule, in their own living rooms, without buying a ticket to a theater.
The only problem was, where do you rent them?
Most video stores in 1985 were small, poorly organized, dimly lit shops with limited selections and zero customer service. You would walk in, spend 20 minutes searching through disorganized shelves, and walk out with nothing because the movie you wanted was already rented.
A man named David Cook looked at those stores and saw an opportunity. Cook was a software entrepreneur from Dallas, Texas.
And he had a simple but powerful idea.
What if you took the video rental store concept and made it massive? Clean. Well lit. Organized. Friendly. With thousands of titles instead of hundreds. In October of 1985, Cook opened the very first Blockbuster video store in Dallas. The store was 8,000 square feet, enormous by the standards of the time, and it stocked over 8,000 individual VHS titles. Nothing remotely like it had ever existed before. People walked in and their jaws dropped. Within a year, Cook had opened 19 stores across the state of Texas. The concept was clearly working. But Cook was a software guy, not a retail empire builder. And in 1987, he sold Blockbuster to a man who absolutely was. Wayne Huizenga was one of the most aggressive franchise builders in American business history. He had already built waste management into a national empire by applying one simple philosophy to the trash collection industry. If something works, multiply it as fast as humanly possible. He applied that exact same philosophy to Blockbuster. Huizenga began opening new Blockbuster stores at a pace that seemed almost impossible. One new store every 17 hours. Think about what that means. Before you finish a single workday, another Blockbuster had opened somewhere in America. By 1989, there were 400 stores. By 1991, over 1,000. By 1993, over 3,000. And at its absolute peak in 2004, Blockbuster operated 9,094 stores across 25 countries. 25 countries. 9,000 stores. 60,000 employees. Annual revenue of $6 billion. $6 billion. From renting movies. Let that number sit with you for a moment. To put that in perspective, $6 billion was more than the annual revenue of many entire countries. Blockbuster was not a video store. It was an empire. Going to Blockbuster on a Friday night was not just entertainment. For millions of American families in the 1990s, it was a ritual. A genuine cultural institution. You would finish dinner, pile the kids into the minivan, and drive to your nearest Blockbuster, and there was always one nearby, because Huizenga had made absolutely sure of that. You would walk through those automatic doors and be hit immediately by that specific smell: plastic cases, carpet cleaner, and fresh popcorn from the display near the entrance. The walls were covered floor to ceiling with movie boxes. New releases on one wall. Classics on another.
Comedy, action, drama, horror, family, every genre had its own section. The kids would run ahead to the video game aisle. The parents would argue about whether to get a comedy or a thriller. And for 20 minutes, sometimes 30, sometimes longer, your entire family would wander those blue and yellow aisles trying to agree on what to watch. It sounds simple. But for tens of millions of Americans, that experience was irreplaceable. It was shared. It was tactile. It was human. It was one of those ordinary moments that people remember for the rest of their lives. The way the carpet felt. The sound of the plastic cases clicking together. The anticipation of a Friday night movie. And Blockbuster owned it completely. Every single piece of it. But here is something important that most people forget when they talk about Blockbuster. The company was not successful just because people loved renting movies. Blockbuster had a financial weapon hidden inside its business model. A weapon so powerful, so consistent, so reliable, that it generated $800 million per year all by itself. Late fees. If you rented a movie on Friday night and did not return it by Monday, you paid a late fee. Usually $1 a day. Sometimes more. It sounds small. But multiply that by 60 million customers, many of whom were perpetually forgetful, perpetually busy, or perpetually choosing to just pay the fee rather than make a second trip to the store, and you get $800 million per year. From people returning movies late. Think about what $800 million means. That is more than the entire annual revenue of many mid-sized American companies. Generated purely from customers not returning movies on time. Customers absolutely hated late fees. Survey after survey showed that late fees were the single biggest complaint Americans had about Blockbuster. People felt trapped. Felt punished. Felt like the store was designed to squeeze money out of them. And they were right, it was. But Blockbuster did not care. Because $800 million per year is a very persuasive argument for not changing anything. By the mid-1990s, Blockbuster was not just a business. It was an American institution. It had crushed every local independent video store that dared to compete with it. It had expanded into music sales, video game rentals, and DVD sales. It had attempted to buy Hollywood studios. It had its own credit card, its own rewards program, its own merchandise. Some analysts were comparing it to McDonald's and Coca-Cola, the kind of brand that felt permanent. Eternal. Too big and too embedded in American daily life to ever disappear. Nobody, not a single Wall Street analyst, not a single business journalist, not a single Blockbuster executive, believed the company could ever truly collapse. And then in 1994, a phone call came that set in motion the chain of events that would eventually destroy everything. In 1994, one of the most powerful media conglomerates in America decided it wanted to own Blockbuster. That company was Viacom, the corporation behind MTV, Nickelodeon, BET, and Paramount Pictures. Viacom CEO Sumner Redstone believed that owning Blockbuster would give Viacom control over how Americans consumed entertainment in their homes. The acquisition price was $8.4 billion. For Blockbuster's shareholders, it looked like an incredible windfall. But here is what those shareholders either did not fully understand, or chose to ignore. Viacom did not pay for Blockbuster with cash. They structured the deal using debt. And that debt, nearly $1 billion of it, was placed directly onto Blockbuster's own balance sheet. The company that had been generating $6 billion in revenue was now carrying a crushing debt burden it had never agreed to take on. Viacom then began extracting maximum short-term profit from Blockbuster while cutting investment in technology, innovation, and long-term strategy. The golden goose was being squeezed hard. And nobody inside Blockbuster had the power to stop it.
Because Viacom owned the majority of the shares. What Viacom wanted, Viacom got. And while Viacom was busy squeezing, a 27-year-old software engineer in California was building something that would eventually make the entire video rental industry obsolete. His name was Reed Hastings. In 1997, Hastings co-founded Netflix together with Mark Randolph. The original concept was not streaming. Streaming did not yet exist at the required scale. The original concept was DVD delivery by mail. You would go to Netflix's simple website, loading slowly over your dial-up internet connection, choose from a catalog of 300 titles, and Netflix would mail you the DVD in a distinctive red envelope. You could keep it as long as you wanted. There was no due date. There was no late fee. Ever. No late fees. 3 words. Directly targeted at the single biggest pain point in the entire video rental industry. Blockbuster's executives knew about Netflix from early on. They monitored it. They discussed it in meetings. And then they dismissed it. Netflix had fewer than 50,000 subscribers in its first year. Blockbuster had 60 million customers. There was simply no way, in the minds of Blockbuster's leadership, that a tiny DVD by-mail startup could threaten an empire of 9,000 physical stores. That assumption was the most expensive mistake in American retail history. By the year 2000, Netflix was struggling. The dot-com bubble was bursting across Silicon Valley. Startups were dying by the hundreds. Netflix was burning through cash and had not yet found a path to profitability. Mark Randolph made a decision. He would fly to Dallas and offer to sell Netflix to Blockbuster outright. The asking price was $50 million. Randolph and Hastings walked into Blockbuster's corporate headquarters and sat across the table from CEO John Antioco and his senior team. Randolph gave his presentation. He explained the subscription model. He laid out the subscriber numbers, 300,000 and growing. He described the no late fee policy and how customers loved it. And then he named his price. $50 million. According to Randolph's own account of the meeting, the Blockbuster executives struggled to maintain professional composure. They found the proposal almost comically small. After the Netflix founders left, Blockbuster's team described Netflix as, and these are their actual documented words, a very small niche business. They passed. They sent Randolph and Hastings back to California with nothing. That $50 million niche business would be worth $30 billion within a decade. And the cost of that single no, measured in Blockbuster's eventual losses, would be measured in the billions. For the rest of his career, John Antioco would be asked about that meeting. And every single time, he would say the same thing. That it seemed like the right decision at the time. That nobody in that room could have imagined what Netflix would become. And that is precisely the point. Because the people who change industries never look threatening at the beginning. Reed Hastings returned to California with a new clarity of purpose. If Blockbuster would not buy Netflix, then Netflix would destroy Blockbuster. Hastings introduced the subscription model, unlimited DVD rentals for a flat monthly fee of $9.99. No parental charge. No late fees. No due dates. Customers who discovered it almost never went back to Blockbuster. Netflix grew from 300,000 subscribers in 2000 to 1 million by 2002. Then 2 million. Then 4 million. Blockbuster's leadership watched the numbers and remained remarkably calm. They still had 60 million customers. They still had 9,000 stores. They still had $6 billion in annual revenue. The idea that Netflix was an existential threat seemed, to them, genuinely absurd. But the 60 million Blockbuster customers were quietly discovering that they had a choice.
And choice, once discovered, is very difficult to take away. In 2004, Blockbuster made its last serious attempt to save itself. A new CEO named John Antioco arrived with a genuine turnaround strategy built on two pillars.
Pillar 1: eliminate late fees entirely and permanently.
Pillar 2: launch Blockbuster Online, a direct subscription-based competitor to Netflix.
Both initiatives launched. And both actually worked.
Eliminating late fees caused an immediate and measurable increase in customer satisfaction.
Blockbuster Online attracted 400,000 subscribers in its very first year. Netflix executives were alarmed.
Reed Hastings would later publicly admit that Blockbuster Online represented a genuine and serious threat to Netflix at that moment. For the first time, the outcome was not certain. Blockbuster had the brand recognition, the physical infrastructure, the customer base, and now a credible online offering.
This was the moment. The last real moment when things could have gone differently. And then Viacom intervened. Viacom's board looked at Antioco's strategy and focused on one specific line item.
The elimination of late fees meant $800 million per year was disappearing from Blockbuster's revenue.
They did not want to hear about long-term subscriber growth.
They did not want to hear about improved customer satisfaction scores. They wanted this quarter's numbers to look right.
They pressured Antioco relentlessly. Antioco refused to reverse course.
He believed, correctly, that the long-term strategy was the only viable path forward.
So Viacom did what majority shareholders do when chief executives refuse to comply.
They pushed him out.
Antioco was gone.
And in his place arrived a man named Jim Keyes, a retail executive with no background in entertainment, no understanding of technology trends, and an extraordinary level of confidence in his own judgment.
Keyes reinstated late fees. He redirected investment away from Blockbuster Online.
And in 2008, standing at a press conference, he told assembled journalists that he did not see Netflix as a threat to Blockbuster. Netflix had 4 million subscribers when he said those words.
It was 2008. 1 year later, Netflix would introduce streaming video, and the physical disc rental business would become permanently, irreversibly obsolete.
When Netflix launched streaming in 2007, the shift was immediate and devastating. Watch any movie, instantly, on your laptop or television, for the same flat monthly fee, with no disc, no envelope, no driving anywhere.
Blockbuster had no answer.
They had spent 3 crucial years fighting internal battles about late fees while Netflix was quietly building an entirely different kind of entertainment company. By 2009, Blockbuster had closed over 1,000 stores. By 2010, they were losing nearly $1 billion per year. The debt that Viacom had loaded onto them 16 years earlier was now crushing them. They tried new store formats. They tried game rentals. They tried their own streaming service, arriving years too late to matter.
Nothing worked.
In September 2010, Blockbuster filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. The following year, Dish Network acquired the remnants of the company for $320 million, compared to the $8.4 billion Viacom had paid just 17 years earlier.
Dish attempted a revival. It failed.
By January 2014, the last corporate Blockbuster stores locked their doors permanently.
1,600 locations across America dark. 60,000 people out of work.
And the buildings themselves, those familiar blue and yellow storefronts that had defined so many Friday nights, were converted into dollar stores, gyms, and urgent care clinics.
The physical memory of Blockbuster was erased almost completely. Almost. But not every Blockbuster closed.
In Bend, Oregon, a small city surrounded by mountains in the Pacific Northwest, one store refused to die. It is owned and operated by a woman named Sandy Harding, who first walked through those doors as an employee in 1992. When Dish Network announced it was closing all remaining stores, Sandy negotiated to purchase the franchise rights for her location independently. She kept the shelves stocked. She kept the blue and yellow carpet. She kept the popcorn machine near the entrance. And she kept the doors open. What happened next surprised everyone. People started driving to Bend from hundreds of miles away just to visit. Not to rent a movie, but to experience something that felt increasingly rare. A physical place that existed before the algorithm decided what you should watch. A store where you walked the aisles and discovered something unexpected. Where the cover art on the box was the trailer. Where a stranger in the next aisle might recommend something you had never heard of. Where the experience of choosing a movie was itself part of the entertainment. The last Blockbuster has been featured in national news stories, documentary films, and, in perhaps the most perfectly ironic moment in entertainment history, a Netflix original special. The company that destroyed Blockbuster made a documentary about the last surviving Blockbuster store. Sandy sells t-shirts that read "Last Blockbuster on Earth." They sell out within hours of every restock. Every Friday night, that parking lot fills up. Not with 60 million customers across 9,000 stores. Just a few dozen people, in Bend, Oregon, doing something that used to be completely ordinary. And is now completely extraordinary. Sandy says she will never close voluntarily. She says the store belongs to the community. To the people who grew up with it. And she is right. Because what that store represents is not just nostalgia. It represents something that millions of Americans did not realize they had lost until it was already gone. So what actually killed Blockbuster? The easy answer is Netflix. But the easy answer is wrong. Netflix was the mechanism. Blockbuster provided the cause. Think about what Blockbuster actually had. 9,000 stores. 60 million loyal customers. $6 billion in annual revenue. They were offered Netflix for $50 million, an amount equal to less than 4 weeks of their late fee revenue alone. They said no. They had a CEO with a working turnaround strategy. They fired him. They had $800 million per year to invest in technology, in streaming, in the future, and they used it to pay debt service on an acquisition structure that Viacom had engineered for Viacom's benefit, not Blockbuster's. Every single time Blockbuster faced a choice between protecting what it had today and building what it would need tomorrow, it chose today. And that pattern, not technology, not Netflix, not streaming, is what killed Blockbuster. The same pattern killed Kodak. A company that invented the digital camera and buried it because they were afraid it would hurt film sales. The same pattern killed Polaroid, Sears, Radio Shack, Borders Books, and Pan Am. And the same pattern is quietly threatening companies right now that we currently believe are too large and too essential to ever disappear. The names will be different. The industries will be different. But the story will be exactly the same. A dominant company. A new threat dismissed as too small. A crucial decision made in favor of short-term comfort. And then, slowly, then suddenly, collapse. Today, Netflix operates in 190 countries and serves 230 million subscribers. They generate over $30 billion in annual revenue. And in Bend, Oregon, one store is still rewinding tapes. Be kind. Rewind. Next week, we are going inside Kodak, a company that employed 145,000 people, invented the digital camera with their own engineers, and then buried that invention in a vault because they were afraid it would eat into their film business. Same pattern. Catastrophically different scale. Subscribe and hit the bell, because that one you will not want to miss. I will see you next week.